Well, welcome everybody who's watching this live or watching this recording after. I am Dr. Elisabeth Marnik. I am a PhD trained scientist. My background is in immunology and genetics, and I am the science communicator. I work under the handle Science Wiz, WHIZ Liz, and I write the Substack newsletter from the Science Classroom. And today I am joined by Matthew, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Matthew Facciani. I'm a social scientist with a background in psychology, sociology, even a little bit of neuroscience. And mostly what I've been researching the last few years is how and why people believe false information, and also looking at different educational tools to help promote critical thinking, media literacy, and stuff like that. So I'm super excited to talk with Liz today, and I think we'll have a nice discussion about all kinds of things.
Yeah. And what's the name of your Substack for people who maybe are
Yeah,
watching who don't know?
Yeah, so I have a Substack called Misguided. It's also the title of my book, and it's all about this how we and why we believe different things, tackling misinformation more broadly, but also just psychological bias and social science as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have you today. I'm hoping to make these lunchtime talks a reoccurring theme throughout the year. We'll see how often I can actually commit to doing them, though. But you're my first one, so I'm glad to have you here. And from your background, it's clear that you really have focused a lot on the social psychology of false information, of misinformation. And can you tell us what made you interested in that topic? Like, how did you find your way into this field?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit of a journey since, like I said, I actually started out in graduate school in neuroscience, and I spent a few years doing neuroimaging, fMRI stuff, and I ended up switching halfway through my PhD into sociology. So not the most traditional route, not something I would necessarily recommend, but it ended up working out because I was able to study the stuff I was interested in more directly. I've always been interested in how people form beliefs, how people process information. Even back from my undergraduate days, I thought it was really interesting learning about how people will interpret the same simple piece of information very differently depending on their backgrounds or what kind of social influence was impacting them. Just having people give the wrong answer in front of you for a very simple task will make you more likely to give that same wrong answer. And I'm always like, wow, like how can this social phenomenon, purely social thing, actually influence like how people process very straightforward information or different cognitive tasks? So I've always been interested in that, and I approached this in a few different ways throughout the years. Looking at first, I was interested in religious beliefs, and then I moved into more political beliefs and political attitudes. And now I look at information more broadly with also an emphasis on health information. So it's kind of been a journey from learning about how people process information from like a neurological level, and then switching into thinking about how our who we know and the different identities that we have can influence information. So I did that with my dissertation work. And then well, I graduated my PhD in 2020. So it was right in the middle of, interesting time.
You know what that means.
Yeah. So it forced me to really think a lot more about health because at the time I actually didn't do a lot of health research. I don't think really any at that point at 2020. But then I got my first job out of school at Vanderbilt University in the Medicine Health Society department. So I was actually specifically looking at health and how it is influenced by these social and psychological forces. So that's kind of the background of how I got to studying this path. And then it kind of evolved even further when I started working at University of Notre Dame in their computer science department, where we looked at different interventions. So how can we actually teach these school like techniques and how to evaluate the credibility of media and information?
That's awesome. And all of this has led you to your new book, which is titled Misguided, that just came out about a month ago now.
Yeah, it's been just about a month. So it's been a whirlwind. It finally came out after 5 years of writing it because, like I mentioned, I finished my PhD in 2020 and it was a very challenging time. And I was very thankful to get this job at Vanderbilt studying health. And it really got me thinking about health attitudes and how people process health information very differently. So I was thinking about writing like a series of op-eds or some types of blogging or even like a short ebook or something. Like I
Mhm.
didn't know I'd actually end up writing a book here, but a few of my friends and colleagues suggested that it might be worth trying to send a few proposals out to different publishers and just kind of seeing what happens. And yeah, thankfully, I was able to get one. I was surprised that actually people replied to my emails. I didn't think anyone would even reply because it was literally just a cold email to the publisher.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. I think I was very lucky, and yeah, it was cool to start working on that. I officially got the contract. I think like January of 2021. After like officially after it went through some reviews, so it took a while to write the book for a variety of reasons. There was delays with COVID and peer review delays. Like I don't know if you experienced this too. I know like a lot of academics and people write papers. It was
Yeah.
just like it was a tough time. Like there was a lot of backlog for all kinds of things. So the silver lining and all that was like I was able to include so much more in this book beyond just what I was
Mhm.
studying at the time because I was hoping this would be out maybe like late 2022. But if it would have came out then, I wouldn't have been able to include nearly as much as far as the stuff I was doing at Notre Dame with the media literacy and digital literacy and AI literacy stuff, and also all the AI stuff too. That's really exploded the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a silver lining that it took longer. I was able to really include a lot of the research I've been doing over the span of 5 years. So it has a lot of stuff in there.
So can you give us a brief synopsis of kind of what you kind of talked about it a little bit, but like if you had to encapsulate your book in just a few sentences, how would you
Yeah.
explain it to somebody?
Yeah. So my book helps us understand the social and psychological forces that guide us towards processing information in different ways. That's the high level summary. And I purposely use the word guide there as a play on the title. And the the broader point of the book is that we're all susceptible to these forces of identities and networks of who we know and the different media we consume. And this all allows us to process information in different ways. And the
Mhm.
position that I take from the book is that we are social creatures. We have these social support systems. We want to belong to different communities. And this provides us with self esteem. It's really important for our psychological well being. So if we have an identity as like a student identity example, I often use this example because we might feel good if we get a good grade. We have different identities and we go to class, we study, we might get a good grade. That makes us feel good. And that can be a very positive thing. And it's very straightforward and it's good. But if we have a really strong political identity, for example, and it makes us process information differently in a way that supports our political team, then that might make us process evidence very differently in a way that's biased and maybe not very objective. So I really dive into the forces of when that process happens because it's not so much just that, okay, like we have these identities. It's like, when do these identities influence us most? Under what context? Under what conditions? And I think that's where it gets really challenging and also interesting to look at like the pressure points of vulnerability for misinformation.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, and that's one of the points I really loved about your book is it really reminds people that we're all susceptible to misinformation. Because sometimes I feel like certain groups of people kind of feel like they're on this high horse where they're
Mhm.
less likely to spread false information, and we know that that's not true, and we could pull out a lot of examples where regardless of political ideology or spectrum you fall on, you have at some point fallen for false information.
Right, exactly. We're all susceptible to it. I mean, I study this stuff, and every now and then I'll see something that uh, I fall for, like an AI generate video. Even like they're getting so good, and I
Mhm.
think like as far as techniques to try to combat that, one of the simplest things is just to try to reflect on our own emotions when we process information online. Like if this thing is getting us really angry, for example, could that be because it's misleading or sensationalized or
Mhm.
not based in reality? And it could be. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that does make us legitimately angry that's real, but a lot of times it's not. And media companies and content creators who can make profits from
Mhm.
clicks, they have a
Right.
motivation to manipulate us in different ways. So definitely something that happens to everyone, and definitely something that we should all be mindful of.
Yeah, and I know I personally remember a recent example of this, and I think it was early winter or early spring, somewhere around then. I saw somebody on my Facebook page posted this like tweet essentially saying that like, oh, like the right is now thinking that transgenic mice are transgender mice. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember seeing that and I was about to share it because I was like, oh my God, this is so stupid. And then I was like, wait, I need to make sure that this is actually true. So I did some digging and I found that no, they literally they that like the intent was that they were talking about transgender mice.
Hmm.
And then a few weeks later, the President Trump said the same thing. And again, I saw the scientific community and I saw other people get mad and be like, "Oh no, he actually meant transgenic." When he didn't. He was using transgender mouse in the wrong context because, mice can't choose their gender identity. But it was still his intent. He actually was using that term correctly to talk about a whole type of research that was focused on things like hormone therapy. So I almost fell for that piece of misinformation in the way that it was initially being portrayed. And it was a really good reminder to me that like I got really angry and I did exactly what you said is I stopped before I shared it. And I was like, okay, can I find out where this information is coming from? Can I find more context to make sure this is actually true? And I think that's an important reminder because we also need to be diligent that we're not spreading false information or misleading claims, just like we want other people to be as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, trying to be mindful of it and trying to think about how fast things can spread. I mean, I think there's a lot of power in that, and viral stuff can go, misleading and sensationalist stuff does spread faster a lot of the time, and few people see the fact check or the correction, and that's something that is so important because yeah, once it's out there, it can spread so quickly, and even if you do delete it or even if you do offer a correction, a very small fraction of people are going to see that.
Yeah.
So you have to be really mindful of what you're putting out there in the first place.
Yeah. And that kind of makes me think about something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about because I have two kids. And I know this is something I have a lot of people who have asked me about is like, as we're thinking about raising kids in this generation, are there things that you think that we could do as educators or as parents to try to help our kids be more aware of these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a challenging question because everything's evolving so quickly with these technologies and AI. I really worry about like this generation of children, especially like teenagers and people entering
Mhm.
college, because like the education side just wasn't ready for this wave of challenges. Like first you had COVID, which really impacted
Right.
people's education, and then it's like maybe a year or two after that you have AI coming in. Um, so I wish I had like better advice for educators. I mean, I think my high level advice for educators to focus on that is to try to understand artificial intelligence and the impact it has instead of just ignoring it. I'm more of an
Mhm.
advocate for
Yeah.
using AI chatbots ethically and understanding their limitations and trying to incorporate that in ways that people might use it in your class. So maybe they could critique the output of the chatbot, for example. Um, so I think that's one way. Um, there's a lot of discussion on social media, the pros and cons of it. Um, I definitely think there should be at least limits of screen time. I think that's just a good way to go about it.
Yeah.
Like I worry about, parents, if they're stressed and working all the time, and then they just like put their kids in front of a tablet. Like I have a lot of empathy for that, but I also worry about the long term effects of having that because I don't know. Like when was growing up, I still played like a lot of video games. So like I was
Mhm.
still in front of a screen for a while. But even the difference between a video game that you can pick up and like put down is different than like TikTok, where it's constantly trying to get you addicted to the next video. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know if I'm really giving any concrete examples of answers, just to say that it's really hard and we should be mindful about it. And, trying our best to teach children the limitations of AI and all this false information out there, because it's kind of weird that our generation, like, we kind of grew up with like the really slow internet and like kind of saw it evolve.
Yeah,
But now this generation already has super fast internet, already has is super well connected digitally. So you kind of don't see those inherent limitations. Like I remember using was it MySpace? I don't know if you use MySpace.
I did. And the
Yeah.
dial-up, like the
Yeah.
little AOL CD disc with the dial-up tone, I still remember that.
Yeah. So like I don't know. I wonder, maybe this is just me and my generational bias, but I wonder if that helped us understand the inherent limitations and all this stuff. Like you can actually program your website and see like what it looks like and say like, oh, like I'm the one writing this HTML code. I can see how it kind of works and how easy it is to make stuff up and make it look very differently. Whereas everything now, it's so well designed. It looks so good. It's the user experience is so fluid that you don't really think like, oh, you could still make something look really shiny that is not, that has, false information or is not going to work well.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I liked the point what you said about educators needing to kind of be aware that this is around, right? For better or for
Hmm.
worse, AI is existing. And a lot of times we know from a lot of areas, right, that abstinence policies as a
Hmm.
abstinence only policies don't work regardless of what you're applying that to, right? So
Right.
figuring out how to have appropriate use is, I think, really important to consider. And that's something that I, as an educator, I think about a lot in terms of I know my students are probably going to be using AI and how can I make sure that that's happening in a way that's responsible and is actually maybe helping their learning and not being used instead of them learning.
Yeah. Yeah, for
But that's
sure.
hard.
It is hard. And yeah, I mean, I think we're all learning together. And I think just being mindful of it and understanding that, yes, this thing is happening, kids are using it. And, yeah, trying not to shy away from it or ignore it, I think is important.
Yeah. So another thing that you mentioned a lot in your work in general, but also I know in your book, is that rebuilding trust in institutions is an important part of combating misinformation and false
Mhm.
information. Can you talk a little bit more about that and some strategies you think we could adapt to kind of help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest challenges today because misinformation is so widespread, and there's, it can be really hard to play whack-a-mole and catch up to all these falsehoods online. So ideally, we would have these trusted scientific and medical institutions where we'd have a collection of experts, self-correcting each other, challenging each other to get the best available evidence, and then people hopefully would trust it. That's the ideal. um, Unfortunately, these institutions are not very trusted, and there is some legitimate reason for that. And I think that's important to acknowledge that they have made mistakes. There's been failures in communication, has been the easy ones to see. Like the classic example is during COVID, a lot of times at the very beginning, we saw these officials say, don't wear a mask. And then right away, they say, definitely wear a mask and we're going to try to mandate it. And even that alone, I think, just really hurt trust. And when you're having these very quick, confident changes in your communication without the transparency and the meaningful dialogue with your communities, it really hurts trust in a way that's very hard to build back. So, knowing that that's what hurts trust, I think kind of doing the opposite then would help rebuild it back. Like if we establish these partnerships and relationships with local communities and actually get their feedback and work with them, it can reduce what's called in the literature this psychological distance between the
Mhm.
institution and the person. And there's been some work showing that if people work with scientists directly, there was one study that had them measure air quality with these scientists in their local communities. And after doing that, they trusted science and scientific institutions more because they got to see how it worked directly and see that process and actually meet scientists. And I mean, a big part of this is just the social component of, do you actually know any scientists? And do you know what their jobs like, who they are as people, instead of this like faceless, abstract institution saying, do this thing or don't do this thing. And I really think that's a big part of it is this disconnect between the institutions and the communities they represent, and then that vacuum that can create for influencers and people who spread falsehoods to take advantage
Right.
of. Um, whether or not they believe the stuff they're saying or not. I mean, sometimes there's a very cynical side of it, is like sometimes they're lying for profit, but then sometimes they actually do believe what they're saying, and it just might be untrue. But either way, they're in your phone directly. They're saying like, "Hey, you have this concern about this health thing. I'm going to address this and answer your questions
Right.
very directly." And then you contrast that with like a medical institution or a health institution just like posting something on their website, says, follow this. So just
Right.
psychologically, there's such a difference between those two types of messaging that you can see, given that trust is such a social process, how one might be much more likely to be trusted than the other.
Yeah, and I love that concept. I'm glad you brought up the psychological distance thing because I think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. And I think especially now as we're seeing all of these policies happening in terms of trying to take away federal funding for scientific research and other things, that is a big component. And I know you and I and a lot of other people that we know are doing a lot of work to try to reduce that psychological distance
Mm-hmm.
and really help people see the ways in which science or public health or all of these things actually is relevant and important and a part of their life.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, absolutely. It's it's a challenging thing because it's not the most satisfying answer sometimes to just say like we need to
Mhm.
slowly rebuild trust across many different domains with lots of people. But I think that is the answer.
Yeah,
It's like you just have to rebuild what has been broken down, and that in this case, is going to be a long, hard, difficult process. So yeah, there's no silver bullet here. There's no quick solution. There's no like one app that's going to change this problem. It's just going to be an opportunity for us to try to do better and to reach people and to have more science communication and more health communication in a way that reaches people where they are. And I am hopeful when I see work like you and other people we know like doing this in a way that really understands that communication side of it. Because for so long, there just wasn't an incentive for people to think about that communication side of it, with academics and scientists not really being rewarded for that. Institutions really wouldn't invest in a social media team or anything like that. And now we have people responding to this finally, like now that it's such a big problem. So it's unfortunate it took this to this point, but
yeah.
I think we can see some optimism here as well.
Yeah, so then for people maybe who are listening, are there suggestions that you would have for them, even if they themselves aren't scientists, for how they could help us in this goal of reducing that psychological distance?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean a few things. Like one, like support your local science communicator. Follow them, share their work. I think I feel like it's a plug for all of us, but it is important because like again, we have this asymmetry between people who will lie and tell people what they want to hear, and that's automatically just going to be better for the algorithm if you can just lie and lean into whatever audience like. Science is not lying to you, it's just giving you the best available evidence, and that's not always going to be
Mhm.
as exciting as someone who says you can just drink juice and cure all your
Right.
illnesses. So like yes, like we do need to kind of try to balance the scales a little bit and have more people try to uh support the science communicators that are doing this work, often for free or for very little pay. So that's just like a structural macro level
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
um Beyond that, I think, like I said before, there's individual techniques that we can use. Trying to be mindful of our emotions, try to improve our media literacy, try to be thoughtful about the information we consume. That's also, it's more on an individual level, so it's hard to think about
Mhm.
that at scale. Um, and yeah, I mean, I guess try to advocate for people who are trying to do this type of work, and
Mhm.
institutions trying to do this work. Unfortunately, there's not many that I know of that are still doing this. That's something that I want to do in my own work. But yeah, it's tough. Like that's an interesting question of like how to reduce that psychological distance. Beyond, yeah, individually supporting science communicators or individually supporting organizations that are doing this. Um, yeah, because the onus is kind of on these institutions to invest in it.
Right. So I guess I wonder about like so in my day job because like you I don't get paid for my I get very little for my actual science communication work. So I have a full-time job in addition to that. And in my full-time job I actually left a faculty job to do this public outreach work as part of my day job, which is I'm very lucky that I found it and that it worked out because there's not very many of these positions, especially now. But one thing I've thought a lot about, and I'm interested to hear your opinion on, is I have a lot of followers, I have a lot of friends who care about science, who find science interesting, and a lot of times they're talking to me about, "Well, what can I like, are there experiments that I could do with my kids? Or are there things I could take into their classroom as like a volunteer and do a science activity with them? Or could they organize like a science event at their library?" Do you think things like that can also help if we equip people with with those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I think that's a great approach to it, is presenting information in a way that they can take and then bring to their local communities and their local groups. So yeah, providing the resources, making it easy for them to be like, okay, I learned from Liz how to do this science thing, and I can share that with my local group, even if it's just like their friends, like fellow moms or
Yeah.
whoever they know in their personal group. Um, so I think that's something that we could do more with our the people that we know, is like, okay, not
Yeah.
only are we going to be sharing the science that we've been studying, but how can we make this in a way that it's super easy for them to read whatever we wrote and then implement that in their local
Yeah.
communities. So yeah, I think that's and I'd be curious, yeah, if you have thoughts about like how to do this like more concretely. I know it's a tough thing.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out ways of doing that. I know I've been talking to a few other people who kind of do outreach work as part of their job, and
Mhm.
we have thought about ways of like there's already a few like public websites with like science activities on them and stuff. So I think it really just comes down to trying to like equip and get the message out to our followers who maybe are interested in doing this kind of work to know that these resources exist and then maybe handhold them through a little bit of like how to actually go about contacting your library or getting into your kids' classroom to do these kinds of things. So I think it's something that I have thought a lot about trying to start doing more of is like making some newsletters or making some resource guides to try to help people start to do these things in their own community.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So like yeah, more of an effort, and then more of like, bouncing around ideas with your fellow science communicators and like sharing this, so it's a
Yeah.
way that, because yeah, everything is, everyone is stressed for time, and you want to try to make it in a way that you can create these resources for people. So yeah, I really like that approach for sure.
Yeah, that's well, we can talk more about that too
Yeah, we'll talk
offline.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to get back to your book a little bit. Um, was there anything in the process of writing and researching this book that you found out that really surprised you that you didn't think about going in? And it could be some like information, but it also could just be about the process of writing a book itself.
Yeah, the process of writing a book was definitely a surprising new journey for me. It was, yeah, like I've been in this space for a while, so a lot of the research I've been doing, I was familiar with. But the book writing process was a whole new thing. I mean, I knew it was going to be hard, but the level of like daily commitment, I think, is really important, to try to like do a little bit each day and to write stuff, even if it might or will likely be changed, I think is another thing. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, it's much harder than writing like a scientific article that's really
Mhm.
dense, because like it's, writing technical jargony stuff, and it's not very fun. At least for me, I don't find that kind of stuff super fun. um but it's shorter, and you can see the end a lot quicker. But then with a book, it's kind of the opposite, where it's like, okay, it's a lot more fun to include higher level approaches to it, and um like higher level approaches, but also like storytelling, and like you can weave in anecdotes, and like really approach it from a level of like making it more practical, that people read it can take stuff from. And that's what I try to do with my book. It's like, okay, if someone's reading this, they're interested in misinformation. I know they're probably interested in misinformation. They picked up the book, but like, what can they actually take away from it? Because I've read a bunch of like science books that are written for broader audiences. And some of them I've really enjoyed because they share like very specific details, but then sometimes they're dense. And then other ones are like really fluffy and they don't really have much substance. And I tried to find a bit of a middle road with my book of like, okay, if someone reads it, they know it's going to be backed up by scientific evidence. It's not just going to be this like fluffy hand waving for hundreds of pages, but it's not going to be just be like a textbook. Like I didn't want that either. So I tried to be like, okay, I'm going to have a lot of science and support to my arguments, but at the end of each chapter, you're learning about very specific like take home lessons that, okay, once I read this book or this chapter on identities, I'm going to really understand this process of not just how identities influence me and under what context are they most make us most vulnerable to misinformation, but how can I reflect on that in my own life and also help other people reflect on it so we can all be more aware of these processes. So I really just made an effort of like giving examples of how we can think about our own identities, exercises to do that, exercises to think about who we know and how that can influence our belief. So it made it more tangible and real as opposed to just what the research says. And same with like the media literacy stuff. I didn't just want to say, okay, like people that have higher media literacy are better at identifying information, but like how can you take these skills with you and apply them in your daily lives as well?
Right. Yeah, and I thought you did that, or like I thought you did that balance very nicely. So I
Thank
thought you
you.
did a good job. Yeah, because it is a hard balance. You want your book to be interesting and informative
Right.
for a variety of people, and that's always a challenge. But you did a good job.
Thank you.
So, in addition to your book, you recently announced that you have launched your first course related to
Yeah.
this. Can you tell us a little bit about that and kind of some of the skills people are going to learn throughout that course and how they can sign up?
Yeah. So it's going to be on my Substack. So I'm excited because I've always loved teaching and I was thinking about like, how can I teach in a way that could be available to anyone outside of just, people in that particular class at the time. And then it kind of dawned on me that I could just do this, like by myself, just um, with just me doing it because I've taught similar courses before. So I've taught like an in-person course on misinformation. Now I'm teaching a master's seminar on misinformation. So I have experience doing this in a formal academic way, but I wanted to make this more accessible to more people. So if you sign up on my Substack, right now it's if you just sign up as an annual subscriber, you'll get access to the full course. And I have my last post is actually detailing some of the elements of it. It's going to be 4 weeks long, and it's going to cover like the four main areas of misinformation that I think are interesting. So like the first week is going to be me giving a short lecture of how we measure misinformation, how we define it, the challenges of it, and the process of actually studying it, like both from my perspective and other people who've studied it. So like, how do we even like? It's such a complex thing. It's such a broad term. Like really trying to get in the details of it. And then I spend the second class diving into the social psychology of susceptibility to misinformation. So it's like we know we have these biases, these confirmation biases. Where do they come from? How do different social forces shape our beliefs? And how can we understand again the context and conditions that make us most vulnerable to hopefully reduce the vulnerability? So you like after you're the second class, you'll really understand, okay, now I understand why this person believes this falsehood that I think is just really ridiculous. But once you understand like why the reasoning behind it becomes a lot more understandable why someone might believe something that to us might seem really silly. So that really dives into the psychology of it. And then the third course dives into the media literacy, digital literacy components of, okay, not only are we going to dive into the individual skills of how we can evaluate information more critically, but what does the research say on what's the best ways to reach more people at scale? And this dives into some of the work that I've been doing with these short media literacy games that you can play online. So really diving into, okay, what evidence-based strategies have worked and how can we incorporate that in our daily lives as well. And then finally, the last week is about technologies and misinformation. So artificial intelligence being the big one, trying to understand what artificial intelligence is, how does it work, what are the limitations of it, and how does it influence our information landscape. So it is an accelerated course. I feel like it's going to be a lot in just 4 weeks, but you get the live, in addition to the lectures, you get the live Q&A, so you can ask me all types of questions about this. And yeah, it's my first time doing it, so I'm excited to see how it goes. I hope to do it again as well. So this is going to be like a good uh, experiment for my side as well. But I I think it'll be interesting for people who want to do a deep dive on this and really learn the nuances of understanding the how and why people believe misinformation and what we can do about it.
Yeah, and I really love it because I know that I get a lot of people who reach out to me, or we it comes up in comment sections in my posts about I've talked a lot about, and I know you and I wrote a post together with Jess and some other people
Hmm.
about kind of building bridges and how to have conversations that help people change their mind. And a lot of times I hear from people, "Well, I tried it once and it didn't work." And then they're like, "Forget it, I'm over it." And I feel like the information that you present in your book and that you're going to present in this course, at least some of it really helps explain why it's never just facts that are gonna help somebody change their mind, and it's never going to happen, like it's probably not gonna, right, happen very instantly. And I think having that information can help people not only navigate those conversations better, but also be more willing to stick with them. Did I lose you, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I had to plug in my phone real quick.
Oh, no,
I
that's okay. Tech issues happen. It's okay.
yeah, my charge, I didn't realize how quickly this would eat up my phone battery, the live
Oh,
Substack.
good to
But
know.
maybe my phone's too old, but I'm still here. No, I definitely
Okay, perfect.
yeah, okay. Let's see. All right, video on. Yeah, I was here.
Video's
I
on.
just had to find a
Awesome.
charger real quick. I
Yeah,
didn't want to fumble my phone.
no, no worries. But yeah, so I was just saying that I think for people who really want to figure out how can they better navigate their own conversations, I think a lot of the information that you will give them will help them realize why it's things like identity that matter sometimes. And if you can link your conversation to their identity, that can help the information be received more. And I think that's just a so I even if you're maybe not necessarily just interested in misinformation, I think there's still a lot of value you could learn from why people fall for false information and how that could help you then navigate hard conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think it influences how we process everything, like our beliefs, information, not even just false information or scientific misinformation, but just like how do other people interpret the same thing differently, or just how does their perspective different than mine? So
Mhm,
it is like a broader, social science book of like how we navigate our social worlds differently, so you can better
mhm,
understand different people because everyone has different experiences and different perspectives. And I do have a chapter on there on how to have more productive dialogue as well.
mhm,
Just broadly about if you want to dive into politics or a scientific issue that you disagree about. So there are strategies that we can use to improve our conversation skills
mhm,
and just interacting with people as well. Um, because yeah, I think one thing that I've realized is that I study this stuff and I've been thinking about it a long time, but not everyone is studying how
mhm.
identities influence people. Um, and but other science communicators do as well. So, like for you, I'm curious for your background. I know we're talking about my book and stuff, but like, um, you do such a great job with communication and understanding the social science side of it. So, like, did you take social science classes, or like, how did you learn those skills?
I did take some social science classes through my undergrad because I
Hmm.
actually considered being a lot of different majors beyond what I ended up being, right? But I think a lot of it has also come down to so for those who maybe don't know my background, I was raised in an anti-science household, and my house was also very poor and very challenging for a lot of other reasons, and I feel like that lens has really helped me see, like, as I've reflected on the things that helped me change my mind, I always realized that it wasn't facts first that helped me change my mind,
Hmm.
and as I started to reflect on that own my own personal experience with changing my mind, and I was vaccinated for the first time in my 20s, it really helped me reframe the way that I communicate, and I think having that lived experience also helps me remember what it was like, so that I try to lead with empathy in those conversations. So I would say it's a combination of some of those social science classes I did take, but then also some of that lived experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the lived experience of like navigating different spaces and like you're in these like liminal spaces of anti-science to science and like seeing that trajectory, it kind of forces you to grapple with how there are so many different factors that influence your beliefs beyond just, reading about something. So yeah, like, I grew up conservative and very religious, and I have very different attitudes than I do now. Um,
Yeah,
and I think going through that process does force you to grapple with the psychology behind it in a way that forces you to understand that, okay, if I just yell facts at someone, it didn't change my mind, so it's probably not going to change their mind either.
right. Exactly. And I think for some people who maybe don't have that experience or who don't reflect on that experience, because I know even I had a hard time initially, like, as I was navigating my mom still is, we disagree on a lot of things. And as I was navigating some conversations with her, I was getting frustrated because I was like, your daughter's a scientist. I'm
Mhm.
telling you all these things. You should just believe me because you know me, blah, 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 blah. And I was getting really frustrated. And then I stopped once I had my own child, particularly, I stopped and I started to realize how this was a lot more complicated. And I started reflecting on, okay, what is it about my experience that helped me take the information that I was raised with and change my mind about it? And then from there, I feel like I've been able to be a better scientist, a better mother, a better daughter, and a better science communicator because of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, it's like not only moving through different identities, but like moving through different social categories of like, being the child and then being the parent. Like you're seeing both perspectives very directly. Um, and yeah, and also having that like background curiosity though too. Like I think that's an important factor, and maybe that's personality differences or something. But
Right, right.
I do think that's you need to be reflecting on it the whole time and being willing to try to acknowledge like why certain things work and certain things don't. And that's where it gets trickier because sometimes we don't want to do that. So trying to be mindful and reflective, is more work, and it's
It is.
harder to ask other people to do that sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, right, if we want to be in a better place in society for a variety of reasons, whatever it is, pick your topic, right? And if you want there to be change in it, then it's going to come down to having to have dialogue with other people who we disagree with to find a way forward.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's not the most satisfying answer or the most provocative answer that we just have to slowly rebuild the things that have collapsed over time. But from my work of diving into this for a while now, I think a lot of it does fall back on that social connection part of it, of
Yeah.
like having dialogue with people and rebuilding relationships with people. So I mentioned like institutions working with their local communities, but also people like getting to know their neighbors and their local communities, and having more opportunities to meet a diverse group of people, because that's one of the main lessons of my book is that this diversity of identities that we have and
Hmm.
social connections that we have provides us with the strongest protection against misinformation.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is we're not so dependent on this narrow set of identities and their corresponding meanings and values that are reinforcing each other. So the most extreme example is that like if all of our identities completely overlap 100%, they're all reinforcing each other, and we don't have any exposure to different types of worldviews or people with different backgrounds, then we're constantly in this most extreme state of, okay, we only have a few meanings that we care about, and they are 100% backing up our entire sense of self and our self esteem. So in that case, if we see information that challenges any of those meanings, it's just a complete attack on who we are as a person. But whenever we have a broader set of identities and we are connected with a lot of different people, then if we see information that challenges one of those identities, it's not completely challenging our entire sense of self. So it provides us with a lot more protection to navigate information more objectively and more carefully instead of just immediately rejecting it. So to do that, that requires these macro level changes of meeting lots of different people and
Right.
having diverse communities and third spaces is something I talk about a lot of, like a way American society is. We go home, we go to work, but we don't really have a third space to like meet lots of
Right.
different people. So college is one of the few places that happens is yeah, when you meet people at college, you meet a variety of different people, you actually live with them, form relationships with them, and that can
Hmm.
create this openness that corresponds to people that have a college education. So I hope that we can create more opportunities for people to meet lots of different people and then reflect on their identities and reflect on who they know. And that will hopefully move us forward and in a less polarizing way.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point because when I reflect back on how I eventually got to the point of changing my mind, I was raised in an anti-science household. We also happened to be evangelical Christian, and I was pulled out of public school because my parents said it was going to corrupt me. So I had a very, very narrow social circle. It was pretty
Yeah.
much my family and my church, and those were the only two parts of my identity. And once I got to college, that is where I started to have I became like an undergrad, and I started joining clubs and I started meeting friends outside of those places. So I did start to expand the parts of my identity. And eventually through building those relationships with people, I started to question some of those anti-science things that I had been taught. And then that is what eventually led to me eventually going to get my PhD and getting vaccinated like for the first time, literally like 2 months before I went to get my PhD, before I
Wow.
went and joined my PhD program. But it was a lot, and like in that moment, right when I was going through that experience in college, I didn't think that that's what was happening
Hmm.
to me. But now reflecting back, I can see how that really is an illustration of your point about the more we can broaden our identity and meet those different types of people in different places, it can be beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it would just make us more resilient as a society as well. Like that's my case for, it would solve so many things, but it's such a hard thing to fix.
I
But
know.
it just makes us more resilient against information. So we can't, you're not, someone can't come in and try to manipulate a whole bunch of people with falsehoods because, they're only ascribing to, these a handful of really strong meanings associated with these identities, then you're just like really vulnerable to manipulation. So
Hmm.
it's kind of funny because I was on this financial podcast and they made a connection with like financial diversity of like ideally you want to have a lot of different investments to protect you against
Right.
risk. And it's similar to misinformation.
Yeah.
It's like if you have a broad set of identities, a diverse set of identities, then if any one of those causes, some challenging information for you, your entire sense of self doesn't collapse. Likewise, like your entire portfolio isn't collapsing if just, if you have a whole bunch of stocks versus just one or two
Yeah.
stocks.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good analogy. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, they were the ones that come up with this. That's like another part of like, meeting lots of different people
Yeah.
and that's another thing I've been trying to do is like connect with people outside of even science spaces and just try to
Hmm.
see like how like the analogies and perspectives that they can bring are also different. So it's like even people who do this, like us, who constantly think about okay, science
Yeah.
communication, fighting misinformation. It's like how do we get outside of our own
Yeah.
bubbles, even though we're trying to do that already. So it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm actually spending the weekend at a local retreat, focused on community building
Oh,
for
cool.
that purpose. Not, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
I'm the only scientist going, but again, for that purpose is like trying to meet more people and learn different ways of navigating things. We're almost at the end of our time, so I wanted to leave with everyone with one thing. Is there one piece of information you wish the public or people watching knew about your book or about misinformation in general?
Yeah, I think we just covered it. So the diversity piece, I think that's something that if I could wave a magic wand and have everyone learn and reflect on, it would be to understand the power of how identities influence us, and then also understand the power of diversity among those identities and how that can create a greater resilience against misinformation and manipulation. So trying to be mindful of our identities. And you can actually, there's exercises you can find online and ones that I write about in my book. You can like draw out your identities like on a piece of paper and actually like see how they connect and intersect and be like, oh man, all of my identities I really care about are all in this like small little bubble. And then you can be like, oh, maybe if I meet different people, I'll have a greater protection against processing information. So I think understanding the diverse set of identities and their
Mhm.
corresponding meanings, trying to really grapple with how that influences our own beliefs, and then also how that can help us understand how other people see the world as well.
Yeah, that's a great one. So, with that, for everyone watching this live or recording, please go buy Matthew's book. It's Misguided, and he is tagged here in the recording. He'll be tagged, and everything will be linked. Perfect. I have only a digital copy, so I couldn't pull it out.
That's okay.
I'm glad you do. And you can follow both of us on Substack. I write from the Science Classroom. Your Substack is called Misguided. Or you can follow us on social media. I'm at Science with Liz, WHIZ. And what's your social media handle?
This is my name, Matthew Facciani, I think on all platforms, but I'm mostly active on Threads, Blue Sky, and trying to be more active on Instagram as well.
Yes, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for watching. And Matthew, it was great talking to you as always. And we will chat again soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Take care, Liz.
Bye.
Bye bye.